What happens when a billionaire woman who chose success over family accidentally encounters the ex-husband and twin daughters she abandoned 6 years ago? This is a story about second chances, the true meaning of wealth, and discovering that some mistakes can be forgiven if you're willing to change everything to earn that forgiveness.
Victoria Blackstone had conquered Wall Street, built a billion-dollar empire, and earned the respect of the most powerful people in the world. But when she saw her ex-husband David walking through LAX terminal with their 6-year-old twin daughters, her entire world came crashing down in the space of a heartbeat. The first-class lounge at Los Angeles International Airport buzzed with the quiet efficiency of wealth and privilege. Victoria Blackstone sat in her usual corner spot, a fortress of productivity built from her MacBook, 3 phones, and a stack of acquisition reports that would determine the fate of a mid-sized tech company by morning. At 38, Victoria had become everything she dreamed of as a struggling MBA student. CEO of Blackstone Ventures, one of the most successful venture capital firms on the West Coast, with a personal net worth that Forbes estimated at $1.2 billion. Her signature red Louboutin heels clicked against marble floors like a metronome of success, and her black Armani suit fit like armor designed to intimidate boardrooms full of men who still weren't used to being outmaneuvered by women. Ms. Blackstone? Her assistant Caroline appeared at her elbow with the deference that came with being paid more than most people's annual salaries. Your jet is ready for departure. The pilot estimates a 4-hour flight to JFK. Victoria nodded without looking up from her laptop screen, where she was reviewing the final terms of a deal that would add another $100 million to her portfolio. Have they loaded the Shanghai contracts? I need to review them before we land. Already in your briefcase, along with the sole presentations for tomorrow's video conference. This was Victoria's life, a carefully orchestrated symphony of flights and meetings, deals and acquisitions, numbers that meant everything and somehow nothing at all. She traveled 3 weeks out of every month, lived in a penthouse that felt more like a hotel suite than a home, and hadn't had a real conversation with another human being in months. It was exactly the life she'd fought for, sacrificed for, and chosen over everything else that had once mattered. Ms. Blackstone? Her assistant Caroline appeared at her elbow with the deference that came with being paid more than most people's annual salaries. Your jet is ready for departure. The pilot estimates a 4-hour flight to JFK. Victoria nodded without looking up from her laptop screen, where she was reviewing the final terms of a deal that would add another $100 million to her portfolio. Have they loaded the Shanghai contracts? I need to review them before we land. Already in your briefcase, along with the sole presentations for tomorrow's video conference. This was Victoria's life, a carefully orchestrated symphony of flights and meetings, deals and acquisitions, numbers that meant everything and somehow nothing at all. She traveled 3 weeks out of every month, lived in a penthouse that felt more like a hotel suite than a home, and hadn't had a real conversation with another human being in months. It was exactly the life she'd fought for, sacrificed for, and chosen over everything else that had once mattered. Ms. Blackstone? Caroline's voice carried a note of concern. Are you all right? You look pale. Victoria followed Caroline's gaze toward the main terminal, visible through the lounge's floor-to-ceiling windows. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes locked onto a scene that felt like a punch to her chest. David. After 6 years, 3 months, and 12 days, there was her ex-husband walking through the crowded terminal, looking older but still heartbreakingly familiar. His dark hair was shorter now, touched with silver at the temples that hadn't been there when she'd last seen him. He wore jeans and a simple blue button-down shirt that brought out his eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at her with love instead of the devastation she'd left in her wake. But it wasn't David who made Victoria's perfectly manicured hands tremble as she gripped her coffee cup. It was the two little girls walking beside him, each holding one of his hands. Emma and Sophie, her daughters. 6 years old now, no longer the babies she'd kissed goodbye on that terrible morning when she'd chosen her career over her family. Emma still had Victoria's blonde hair, now long and braided with small ribbons, while Sophie had inherited David's dark curls. They were wearing matching purple dresses and tiny backpacks covered in cartoon characters Victoria didn't recognize. They looked happy, secure, complete. They looked like they never needed her at all. "Miss Blackstone?" Caroline's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Should I tell the pilot to delay departure?" Victoria couldn't answer. She watched frozen as David knelt down to tie Sophie's shoelace, as Emma pointed excitedly at something in a shop window, as her family, her former family, moved through their lives with an ease that spoke of years without her. David looked up then, scanning the terminal with the protective awareness of a single parent, and for one heart-stopping moment, his gaze swept across the lounge windows. Victoria ducked instinctively behind her laptop screen, her pulse hammering against her throat like a caged bird desperate to escape. When she dared to look again, they were gone, swallowed by the crowd of travelers heading toward their gate, heading toward whatever life they'd built in the ruins of what she had destroyed. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her business partner in New York. "Board meeting moved to 8 a.m. Need your final decision on the Morrison acquisition." The Morrison acquisition. $40 million, a deal that would cement her reputation as one of the most ruthless and successful investors in the country. 6 years ago, she'd have been on that plane without a second thought, already mentally rehearsing her presentation, calculating profit margins and market projections. 6 years ago, she'd convinced herself that providing financial security for her family was worth any sacrifice, including the family itself. Now, staring at the empty terminal where her daughters had just been, Victoria couldn't remember why any of it had ever seemed important enough to lose them. "Caroline," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt, "cancel the New York flight." "Cancel it? But Miss Blackstone, the board meeting." "Cancel it," Victoria repeated, already pulling out her phone. "And book me on the next flight to—" She paused, realizing she didn't even know where David and the girls lived now. The last address she had was their old house in San Diego, the one she'd helped choose, the one she'd left 6 years ago and never seen again. But she knew someone who would. Victoria scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she hadn't called in 2 years, David's sister, Michelle. The last conversation they'd had ended with Michelle telling Victoria she was a selfish monster who didn't deserve to call herself a mother. Victoria hung up and thrown herself even deeper into her work, using success as a shield against the truth in Michelle's words.
Now, with trembling fingers, she dialed the number. "Michelle, it's Victoria." The silence on the other end stretched for so long Victoria wondered if the call had dropped. When Michelle finally spoke, her voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I saw them, David and the girls, at LAX." Victoria's voice cracked, despite her efforts to control it. "Michelle, I need to know where they are, where they live now." "Are you serious? After 6 years of radio silence, you think you can just... Please!" The word came out as a whisper, carrying 6 years of suppressed pain. "I know I have no right to ask. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I saw my daughters today, and I..." Victoria closed her eyes, admitting the truth she'd spent 6 years running from. "I've made a terrible mistake, Michelle, and I need to try to fix it." Another long silence,
When Michelle finally spoke, her voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I live in Portland now. David teaches high school English, and the girls are in first grade at Roosevelt Elementary. They're doing well, Victoria. Really well. David's even—" Michelle paused. "David's even what?" "He's been seeing someone. A teacher at his school. Sarah. She's good with the girls." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. Of course David had moved on. Of course he'd found someone who could give him and the girls the stability and presence she'd never been able to provide. Someone who chose family over ambition, love over success. "Victoria, are you still there?" "I'm here," Victoria managed. "Michelle, do you think there's any chance David would let me see them? Just once?" Michelle's sigh carried the weight of years of family drama and heartbreak. "I don't know, Victoria. The girls don't really remember you. They were so young when you left, and David, he's built a good life for them. A stable life. I don't know if he'd want to risk that." "I understand." Victoria's voice was barely audible. "But I have to try." "Victoria, what's changed? Why now, after all this time?" Victoria looked around the first-class lounge, at the leather chairs and crystal glasses and all the trappings of the success she'd prioritized over everything else. "I used to think I was building something important. I thought I was securing their future, making sure they'd never want for anything. But seeing them today, they looked so happy without me. And I realized that all I've really built is a very expensive prison." When Victoria hung up 20 minutes later, she had David's address, his phone number, and a plane ticket to Portland. She also had something she hadn't felt in 6 years: hope. It was a fragile, terrifying hope built on the slim possibility that the family she'd abandoned might somehow find it in their hearts to give her a second chance. As her new flight was called for boarding, Victoria gathered her things with hands that shook slightly. The Morrison acquisition would have to wait. The board meeting would happen without her. For the first time in 6 years, Victoria Blackstone was choosing family over business. She just prayed it wasn't 6 years too late.
The flight to Portland felt both endless and too short. Victoria spent the 2.5 hours alternating between reviewing what she'd say to David and questioning whether she had any right to disrupt the life he'd built with their daughters. By the time she landed at Portland International, rented a car, and drove through the tree-lined streets of David's neighborhood, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across neat suburban lawns. This was a world away from her Manhattan penthouse, a place where children played in yards instead of being shuttled between nannies and private schools, where families ate dinner together instead of grabbing takeout between business calls. David's house was a modest 2-story colonial with a front porch swing and flower boxes under the windows. A small bicycle with training wheels and a larger one without them were propped against the garage. A chalk hopscotch court decorated the driveway, and wind chimes shaped like butterflies hung from the porch ceiling. It looked like a home in a way Victoria's expensive properties never had. Victoria sat in her rental car for 20 minutes, engine running, air conditioning fighting against the panic sweat that had nothing to do with the Portland heat. Through the front window, she could see warm light and the movement of people living their lives. Her people, once upon a time. Finally, before she could lose her nerve entirely, Victoria turned off the engine and walked up the porch steps. Her Louboutin heels clicked against the wooden boards, as out of place in this setting as she felt in her own skin. She raised her hand to knock, then froze as voices drifted through the open window beside the door.
"Daddy, can we have ice cream after dinner?" A small voice, Emma's voice, though deeper than Victoria remembered. "If you eat all the vegetables," David replied, and Victoria's chest tightened at the familiar warmth in his tone. "But that means all the carrots, Emma. I saw what you did with them last night." "Sophie ate them," Emma protested. "Did not," came Sophie's indignant response. "Girls, girls," laughed a woman's voice that Victoria didn't recognize. "How about we make a deal? If you both finish your vegetables, we'll make sundaes for dessert." Sarah, the teacher Michelle had mentioned, the woman who was there for bedtime stories and scraped knees and all the daily moments Victoria had traded for board meetings and business trips. Victoria's hand dropped to her side. What was she doing here? These people had built a family, a life, a routine that didn't include her. Who was she to show up after 6 years and disrupt their peace? But as she turned to leave, the front door opened. "Can I help you?" David's voice was polite, but wary, the way anyone would respond to a stranger lurking on their porch. Victoria turned slowly, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. David stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside, and for a moment he didn't recognize her. She watched the exact second when realization hit, the way his face went pale, the way his hand tightened on the doorframe, the way his whole body seemed to brace for impact. "Hello, David," Victoria said softly. Victoria! Her name came out like he was testing whether saying it would make her disappear. What are you? How did you? "I saw you at LAX today. You and the girls." Victoria's voice was steadier than she felt. "I called Michelle." David's jaw tightened at the mention of his sister. "Michelle gave you my address?" "I begged her to." Victoria took a small step closer, noting how David tensed. "David, I know I have no right to be here. I know what I did was—" "Daddy?" a small voice called from inside the house. "Who's at the door?" Victoria's breath caught as Emma appeared beside David, peering around his legs with curious blue eyes. Victoria's eyes, inherited along with her blonde hair and stubborn chin. 6 years. Victoria had missed 6 years of bedtime stories and first days of school, lost teeth and birthday parties, scraped knees and bad dreams. The little babies she'd left behind had grown into real people with personalities and preferences and lives that had continued without her. "Emma, Sophie," David said quietly, his voice carefully controlled. "Go inside and help Sarah with dinner. I'll be in shortly." "But Daddy!" "Now, Emma." There was something in David's tone that made both girls retreat without further argument, though Victoria caught Sophie sneaking one more curious glance over her shoulder before disappearing into the house. David stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind him, creating a barrier between Victoria and the family she'd abandoned. In the fading daylight, she could see the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 years ago, the way his shoulders carried tension like a shield. "You can't be here," David said quietly, but his voice carried the weight of absolute finality. "David, please, I just want to, talk to them? Explain why their mother disappeared when they were barely walking? Disrupt the stability it's taken me 6 years to build?" David's voice rose slightly, then dropped as he remembered the girls inside. "Do you have any idea what you did to them? To us?" Victoria felt tears threatening and fought them back. "I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices." "Terrible choices?" David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Victoria, you didn't make terrible choices. You made a choice. You chose your business over your family, and then you disappeared completely. No phone calls, no letters, no birthday cards. Emma asked me for 2 years when Mommy was coming home, and I had to tell her I didn't know because you never called, never wrote, never gave us any indication you even remembered we existed." Each word was a knife to Victoria's chest, made worse by the knowledge that they were all true. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I could build the business, if I could secure their financial future. They needed their mother, not a trust fund. David's composure cracked, revealing the pain he'd been carrying for 6 years. Do you know what Sophie's first word was after you left? It was Mama. She said it for months, looking around the house, looking for you. And Emma used to save half her Halloween candy because she wanted to give it to Mommy when she came back. Victoria pressed her hand to her mouth, choking back a sob. David, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm here now. I want to make it right. Make it right. David shook his head. Victoria, it's been 6 years. They've adapted. They've healed. They've moved on. Emma barely remembers you, and Sophie doesn't remember you at all. The words hit Victoria like physical blows, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet David's eyes. Then let me try to earn their love back. Let me try to be the mother I should have been. And what happens in 6 months when the novelty wears off, when your business needs you and you disappear again? What happens to them then? Victoria opened her mouth to deny it, to promise it would be different this time, but the words died in her throat because David was right to doubt her. Her track record spoke for itself. I've changed, she said finally, knowing how hollow it sounded. Have you? Or are you just feeling guilty because you saw them today and remembered what you gave up? David's voice was gentler now, but somehow that made it worse. Victoria, I don't want to hurt you, but I have to protect them. They have a good life now, a stable life. Sarah loves them like they're their own daughters, and they love her back. They call her... David paused, seeing the pain in Victoria's eyes. They call her what? Victoria whispered. They call her Mom, David said quietly, because that's what she is to them now. That's what you let her become when you left. The words shattered something inside Victoria's chest, something she'd been holding together with ambition and denial and the desperate hope that she could somehow fix what she'd broken. She sank onto the porch steps, her designer suit and perfect makeup suddenly seeming like costumes from a play she no longer wanted to perform in. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I forfeited my right to be their mother when I walked away. But David, seeing them today, I realized that everything I thought I was building meant nothing without them. I'd give it all up, every dollar, every deal, every success for just the chance to tell them I'm sorry. David was quiet for a long moment, watching her cry on his front steps, this woman who had once been his wife, his partner, the mother of his children, now reduced to a broken stranger begging for scraps of forgiveness. The girls don't know, he said finally. Don't know what? That you left by choice. I told them you had to go away for work and couldn't come back. I let them think it wasn't your choice because I couldn't bear to let them grow up believing their mother didn't want them. The kindness in his words, protecting their daughters even from the truth of Victoria's abandonment, made her cry harder.
Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between love and ambition? Tell us in the comments about the moments that taught you what really matters in life. Why? Whispered Victoria. Why would you protect me when I hurt you so badly? Because I didn't do it for you, David replied, his voice soft but firm. I did it for them. They deserved to believe they were lovable, even if their mother couldn't figure out how to love them more than her career. Victoria stood slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What would it take? What would I have to do to prove to you that I've changed, that I want to be part of their lives? David looked at her for a long moment, and Victoria saw the war playing out in his expression. The lingering love he'd once felt for her, battling against 6 years of hurt,
and the protective instincts of a single father who'd built a new life from the ashes of their broken marriage. "I don't know," he said finally. "I honestly don't know if that's even possible anymore." Before Victoria could respond, the front door opened and Sarah appeared, a pretty woman with kind eyes and flour on her apron, looking like everything Victoria had never been. Domestic, present, maternal. "David, the girls are asking about dinner, and Emma spilled juice on her dress." She trailed off as she noticed Victoria. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had company." "Sarah," David said carefully, "this is Victoria, the girl's biological mother." Sarah's eyes widened, and Victoria saw understanding dawn in her expression, along with something that might have been pity. "I see. Well, I'll keep the girls inside and finish dinner." As Sarah disappeared back into the house, Victoria felt the weight of being reduced to biological mother in her own daughter's lives. It was accurate, devastatingly so, but it hurt more than any business rival's insult ever could. "I should go," Victoria said quietly, recognizing defeat when she saw it. "Victoria," David called as she reached the porch steps, "I'm not saying never. I'm just saying not yet. And maybe not like this. If you really want to be part of their lives, you're going to have to prove that you can put them first, consistently, for their sake, not yours." Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. As she walked back to her rental car, she caught a glimpse through the dining room window, David and Sarah helping Emma and Sophie with their dinner, all of them laughing at something one of the girls had said. They were a family, complete without her. But for the first time in 6 years, Victoria had a purpose beyond profit margins and acquisition targets. She had to find a way to prove that she could be the mother Emma and Sophie deserved, even if she was 6 years too late to start.
Victoria spent that night in a Portland hotel room, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how to rebuild a relationship with children who didn't remember her and an ex-husband who had every reason not to trust her. By morning, she'd made a decision that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. She called her assistant in New York. "Caroline, I need you to cancel all my meetings for the next month." "A month?" "Miss Blackstone, the Tokyo expansion, the Morrison deal." "Have James handle Tokyo. Morrison can wait. And Caroline, I need you to find me a furnished apartment in Portland, Oregon. Something normal, not luxury, just comfortable." The silence on the other end spoke volumes about how unprecedented this request was. "For how long?" Caroline asked finally. "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "Maybe permanently." After hanging up, Victoria drove to Roosevelt Elementary School and sat in her car across the street, watching the morning drop-off routine. She saw David pull up in a practical Honda sedan, saw him help Emma and Sophie out of their car seats. When had they grown big enough for car seats instead of infant carriers? Saw him kiss both girls goodbye and ruffle their hair before they ran toward the school entrance. They moved with the easy confidence of children who knew they were loved and safe. David watched them until they disappeared inside, and Victoria saw the gentle smile on his face, the expression of a father who found joy in the simple routine of getting his daughters to school safely. It was a moment of such ordinary parental love that Victoria had to grip the steering wheel to keep from crying. How many moments like this had she missed? How many school mornings and bedtime stories and scraped-me kisses had she traded for board meetings and business trips? "Excuse me, ma'am." A knock on her passenger window made Victoria jump. A police officer stood beside her car, looking concerned but professional. "Is everything all right? You've been parked here for about an hour." Victoria rolled down the window, realizing how suspicious she must look.
a woman in an expensive car watching a school. "I'm sorry, officer. I was just—" She gestured helplessly toward the school. "My daughters go here. I haven't seen them in a long time." The officer's expression softened slightly, but remained cautious. "Are you experiencing a custody situation, ma'am? If you need assistance with legal visitation—" "No, nothing like that," Victoria said quickly. I made some mistakes, and I'm trying to figure out how to fix them." The officer studied her for a moment, then stepped back. "Might I suggest actually going inside and talking to the school counselor? Sitting in a car watching children isn't going to fix anything, and it's making the other parents nervous." Victoria nodded, embarrassed. "You're right. I'm sorry." As the officer walked away, Victoria realized he was absolutely right. She couldn't rebuild relationships from the outside looking in. If she wanted to be part of Emma and Sophie's lives, she needed to actually engage with their world. 3 days later, Victoria stood in the principal's office at Roosevelt Elementary School, feeling more nervous than she had during any business negotiation. "Miss Chen," Victoria said to the principal, a kind-looking woman with graying hair and patient eyes, "I'd like to volunteer." "That's wonderful, Miss Blackstone. What type of volunteer work interests you? We have reading programs, lunch supervision, field trip chaperones." "Whatever you need most," Victoria interrupted. "I have flexible availability." "Flexible availability is unusual for our parent volunteers. Most of our parents are juggling work schedules." "I'm not most parents. I'm trying to learn how to be any kind of parent at all." Something in Victoria's voice must have conveyed the depth of her struggle, because Ms. Chen's expression gentled. "Are you Emma and Sophie Walsh's mother? David mentioned that their biological mother might be reconnecting with the family." Victoria's chest tightened. "He did?" "David Walsh is one of our most involved parents, Ms. Blackstone. The girls adore him, and he's very protective of their emotional well-being. When he mentioned that their biological mother might be returning to their lives, I could see his concern for how it might affect them." "What did he say about me?" Victoria asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Ms. Chen chose her words carefully. "He said that you'd made choices that took you away from the family, but that people can change if they're truly committed to doing so. He also said that if you were serious about being part of Emma and Sophie's lives, you'd need to prove it through actions, not words." Victoria nodded, recognizing David's wisdom, even as it stung. "That's why I'm here. I want to be around my daughter's world, even if they don't know who I am yet. I want to understand what their days look like, what makes them happy, what challenges they face." "I see." Ms. Chen made a note in her file. "We could certainly use help with our after-school reading program. It runs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 3:30 to 4:30. The volunteers work with individual children who need extra support with their literacy skills." Victoria's heart leapt. "Would Emma and Sophie be in that program?" "Sophie participates, yes. She's a bright child, but struggles a bit with reading comprehension. Emma's actually ahead of grade level in reading, so she wouldn't need the extra support."
"I'd like to help with the program," Victoria said immediately. Mrs. Chen studied her carefully. "Ms. Blackstone, I need to ask, have you discussed this with David? I don't want to create any family conflict or confusion for the children." Victoria's face fell. "No, I haven't talked to David about it. He asked me to prove that I can put the girls first, but he also made it clear that he doesn't want me disrupting their lives." "I see the dilemma," Mrs. Chen said gently. "Why don't I give David a call? If he's comfortable with you volunteering in a general capacity, not specifically working with Sophie, Then we can move forward." Victoria's panic rose in her chest. "What if he says no?" "Then we'll respect his decision. But Ms. Blackstone, if you're truly committed to rebuilding a relationship with your daughters, you're going to need David's cooperation. Starting a secret campaign to insert yourself into their lives isn't going to build the trust you need." That afternoon, Victoria waited by her phone like a teenager hoping for a date. When it finally rang, her hands shook as she answered. "Victoria, it's David." "Hi." Victoria's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Mrs. Chen called me about your volunteer application." Victoria closed her eyes, bracing for rejection. "David, I know you said to stay away, but I thought if I could just be around their school environment, if I could understand their world better." "Victoria." David's voice was gentler than she expected. "I talked to Sarah about it. She thinks maybe it's not a terrible idea." Victoria's eyes snapped open. "Really?" "Sarah pointed out that the girls are going to have questions about you eventually. Emma's already starting to ask why some kids have mommies who come to school events and she doesn't. If you're really committed to being part of their lives, maybe it's better for them to get used to you being around gradually, in a safe environment." "You mean it?" Victoria could hardly believe what she was hearing. "There are conditions," David said firmly. "You don't identify yourself to them as their mother. Not yet. You're just another volunteer. You don't seek them out specifically or try to develop individual relationships with them. And if this becomes disruptive to their emotional well-being in any way, it stops immediately." "I understand," Victoria said quickly. "I agree to all of it." "And Victoria, this doesn't change anything between us. This is just a trial run to see if you can actually follow through on putting their needs first." "I understand that too," Victoria said, though his words stung. "David, thank you. I know you don't owe me anything, and the fact that you're even giving me this chance—" "I'm not doing it for you," David echoed what he'd said on his porch days earlier. "I'm doing it because Sarah thinks the girls deserve the chance to know their biological mother, even if things don't work out the way you're hoping."
Three weeks into volunteering at the reading program, Victoria had learned more about her younger daughter than 6 years of guilt and longing had taught her. Sophie was shy but determined, working through picture books with the concentration of a scientist conducting crucial research. She had David's methodical approach to problem solving, but Victoria's stubborn refusal to give up when something was difficult. Sophie also had a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room and a habit of tucking her dark curls behind her ears when she was thinking hard, a gesture that made Victoria's chest tighten every time because it was exactly what she herself did during stressful business meetings. "Miss Victoria," Sophie said during their reading session on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, "can you help me with this word?" Victoria's heart jumped every time Sophie said her name, even though the little girl had no idea who she really was. "Of course, sweetheart. Which word?" Sophie pointed to a line in her book about a lost puppy. "This one. Family. Family," Victoria said softly, the word carrying more weight than Sophie could possibly understand. "Family," Sophie repeated carefully. "The puppy was looking for his family." "That's right. The puppy was lost and wanted to find his family, the people who loved him and would take care of him." Sophie nodded seriously, then looked up at Victoria with curious eyes. "Miss Victoria, do you have a family?" The innocent question hit Victoria like a physical blow. She looked into her daughter's face, so trusting, so open, and struggled to find an answer that wouldn't be a lie, but wouldn't reveal the heartbreaking truth either. I had a family once, Victoria said carefully. But I made some mistakes, and I lost them. That's sad, Sophie said, with the matter-of-fact sympathy of a 6-year-old. Maybe they'll come back, like the puppy's family came back. Maybe, Victoria whispered, fighting back tears. It was at that moment that Emma appeared at their table, having finished her own reading assignment early. Victoria's breath caught as she looked at her older daughter, so much taller than Sophie, her blonde hair in braids that reminded Victoria painfully of herself at that age. "Sophie, Mrs. Patterson says we can go to the playground if we're done with reading," Emma announced, then noticed Victoria. "Who's this?" "This is Miss Victoria," Sophie said proudly. "She's been helping me read better. Miss Victoria, this is my sister Emma." Victoria's hands trembled as she looked at both her daughters standing side by side, so close she could touch them, so far from knowing who she really was. "Hello, Emma," Victoria said softly. "Sophie's told me a lot about you." Emma studied Victoria with the sharp intelligence Victoria remembered from her toddler years, except now that intelligence was directed at a stranger rather than her mother. "Are you new? I haven't seen you at school before." "I just started volunteering recently," Victoria replied, technically truthful. "Emma's the best reader in our whole grade," Sophie said loyally. "She doesn't need help like I do." Emma's expression softened as she looked at her sister. "You're getting lots better, Sophie. Remember last week when you read that whole book about the dragons?" Victoria watched the interaction between her daughters with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. They were so loving with each other, so protective and supportive. Emma had stepped into a big sister role that spoke of maturity beyond her years, and Sophie looked at Emma with the kind of adoration that only came from feeling truly safe with someone. They were good kids, happy kids. David and Sarah had done an amazing job raising them. The thought of Sarah sent a familiar pang through Victoria's chest. In the 3 weeks she'd been volunteering, she'd seen Sarah at school events, watched her interact with Emma and Sophie with the natural ease of someone who'd been there for bedtime stories and scraped knees and all the daily moments of motherhood Victoria had missed. Sarah was everything Victoria wasn't: present, consistent, putting the girls' needs above her own ambitions. The girls loved her openly, completely, calling her Mom without hesitation or confusion. "Miss Victoria," Sophie's voice brought Victoria back to the present, "are you okay? You look sad." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about something." "My daddy says when he looks sad like that, he's missing someone," Emma said with startling perceptiveness. "Are you missing someone?" Victoria's throat tightened. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I am missing someone very much." "Maybe you could call them," Sophie suggested helpfully. "When I miss Grandma Michelle, Daddy lets me call her on the phone." "It's not that simple," Victoria said gently. "Sometimes when you lose someone, it's because of mistakes you made, and then you have to figure out how to make up for those mistakes before you can have them back in your life." Emma tilted her head, considering this with 6-year-old seriousness. "What kind of mistakes?" Victoria looked at her daughter, this little girl who deserved so much more than Victoria had given her, and tried to find words that would make sense to a child. "The kind of mistakes that happen when you think other things are more important than the people you love, when you choose work over family, or success over being present for the people who need you." "That's a really big mistake," Emma said solemnly. "Yes, it is." The conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Patterson announcing that the reading program was over for the day. As children began packing up their books and backpacks, Victoria watched Emma help Sophie organize her materials with practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing it for years. "Sophie, Emma," David's voice called from the library entrance. "Ready to go home?" Victoria's pulse spiked as David approached their table, his expression carefully neutral when he saw her there with both girls. This was the first time he'd seen her interacting with Emma, and Victoria could read the wariness in his eyes. "Daddy!" Sophie ran to hug David's legs. "Miss Victoria helped me read a whole story about a family, and I only needed help with 3 words." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," David said, his gaze moving between Victoria and his daughters. "Did you remember to thank Miss Victoria for her help?" "Thank you, Miss Victoria," Sophie said dutifully. Emma hung back slightly, studying the interaction between David and Victoria with the sharp observation skills that made Victoria's chest tight with recognition. Even at 6, Emma was reading the undercurrents in adult interactions, picking up on tensions and unspoken communications. "Daddy," Emma said suddenly, "Miss Victoria was telling us about missing someone because she made mistakes. She seems really sad about it." David's expression shifted, surprise replacing wariness. "Did she?" Emma nodded seriously. "She said sometimes you have to make up for mistakes before you can have people back in your life. Daddy, is that true?" Victoria watched David struggle with how to answer, seeing him weigh the truth against age-appropriate explanations, against the complexity of their situation. "Sometimes it is true," David said finally. "When we hurt people we love, we have to work very hard to earn their trust back. And sometimes," he paused, his eyes meeting Victoria's briefly, "sometimes people can change and become better than they used to be." "Do you think Miss Victoria's person will forgive her?" Sophie asked, with the innocent hope of a child who hadn't yet learned that some mistakes couldn't be undone. David's gaze lingered on Victoria's face, and she saw him taking in her civilian clothes, her obvious emotional investment in the reading program, the way she'd been consistently showing up for 3 weeks without fanfare or demands for recognition. "I don't know," David said quietly, "but I think the most important thing is that Miss Victoria keeps trying to be better, keeps showing up, keeps putting the people she loves first. That's how you prove you've really changed." Victoria felt tears threatening and quickly looked down at her hands. The conversation was clearly more than just a hypothetical situation, and even Emma seemed to sense the weight behind the words. "Girls, go get your backpacks," David said gently. "I need to talk to Miss Victoria for a minute." As Emma and Sophie ran off to collect their things, David sat down in the small chair Sophie had vacated, looking absurdly large in the child-sized furniture. "How are you doing with all this?" he asked quietly. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," Victoria admitted. "Sitting with her, helping her read, listening to her talk about her family and her life, and knowing that I gave up the right to be part of it. But David, she's amazing. They both are. You and Sarah have raised incredible children." "They are pretty incredible," David agreed, his voice softening with paternal pride. "And, Victoria, I can see how hard this is for you. The other volunteers have mentioned how dedicated you've been, how good you are with all the kids." Victoria looked up hopefully. "Does that mean—" "It means you're doing what I asked you to do. You're showing up consistently, putting their needs first, proving that you can follow through on your commitments. Mrs. Patterson mentioned that Sophie has improved dramatically in her reading since you started working with her. She looks forward to Wednesdays because she gets to read with Miss Victoria." Victoria's heart swelled. She's such a smart little girl. She just needed someone to be patient with her, to let her work at her own pace. "That's something the old Victoria never understood," David said quietly. "You were always rushing toward the next goal, the next achievement. You never knew how to just be present." "I'm learning," Victoria said. "David, I know I have no right to ask this, but..." Victoria took a deep breath, knowing she was about to risk the fragile progress she'd made. "Thanksgiving is next week. I know you probably have plans with Sarah's family, and I'm not asking to be included. But I was wondering,
could I maybe take the girls out for a few hours? Just something simple like ice cream or the park? I promise I won't tell them who I am. I won't disrupt your plans. Victoria's voice cracked. I just want to spend a little time with my daughters. It's been 6 years since I've been able to give them anything for a holiday. David was quiet for so long, Victoria thought he was going to say no. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. What you're asking, that's a big step, Victoria. Being alone with them, taking responsibility for them, even for a few hours. I know it's asking a lot, but David, I've been consistent for 3 weeks. I've shown up every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I've followed all your rules, respected your boundaries. I'm not the same person who walked away 6 years ago. How can I be sure of that? You can't, Victoria admitted. You can only judge me by my actions from here forward. But David, I swear to you, on everything I have left to lose, I will not hurt them again. I will not disappoint them again. I will not put anything, any business deal, any meeting, any opportunity ahead of being there for them. David studied her face, and Victoria saw him weighing 6 years of hurt against 3 weeks of commitment, past abandonment against present commitment. 2 hours, he said finally. Saturday afternoon, 2 to 4. Ice cream in the park. I pick a public place, and you bring them back exactly on time. Victoria felt like she might faint from relief. Really? You mean it? I mean it. But Victoria, this isn't just about giving you a chance. This is about letting Emma and Sophie get to know you gradually as a person, first before they ever know you're their mother. If this goes well, if you continue to prove you can be trusted with their well-being, then maybe we can talk about telling them the truth. And if it doesn't go well? David's expression grew serious. Then this ends. No more volunteering, no more contact, no more disrupting their lives. They've been hurt enough. Victoria nodded, understanding the weight of what she was offering and what she stood to lose. I won't let them down, David. I won't let you down. Don't make promises about the future, David said, standing up as the girls returned with their backpacks. Just show up at 2 on Saturday and be the best version of yourself you can be for 2 hours. That's all anyone can do. As David left with Emma and Sophie, Victoria sat alone in the now empty library, surrounded by children's books and the lingering echoes of her daughters' voices. In 4 days, she would have her first real time alone with Emma and Sophie since they were babies. It was the chance she'd been praying for, and it terrified her more than any business negotiation ever had. Because this time, the stakes weren't measured in dollars or market share. This time, she was negotiating for her family's heart.
Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, typical Portland weather that matched Victoria's nervous energy. She'd changed clothes 4 times, finally settling on jeans, boots, and a warm sweater, the kind of practical outfit a mother would wear to take her children for ice cream and playground time. The thought stopped her cold as she looked in the mirror. She wasn't taking her children anywhere. She was taking Emma and Sophie, 2 little girls who knew her only as Miss Victoria, the reaving volunteer. The woman who'd given birth to them was still a stranger they might never accept. Victoria arrived at Laurelhurst Park 10 minutes early, her stomach churning with anticipation and terror. David's car pulled up exactly at 2 o'clock, and Victoria watched through her windshield as he got out and helped both girls from their car seats. Emma and Sophie were bundled in matching pink raincoats, their faces bright with the excitement of an unexpected adventure. Victoria could see David talking to them seriously, probably reminding them of the safety rules he'd undoubtedly established for this outing. "Miss Victoria," Sophie called out, running toward her the moment she spotted her. "Daddy said we get to have ice cream with you." Victoria's heart melted as Sophie hugged her legs with the uninhibited affection of a 6-year-old. Emma followed more cautiously,
her sharp eyes taking in the park, Victoria, and the situation with the careful assessment that reminded Victoria so much of herself. "Hi, girls," Victoria said, her voice slightly hoarse with emotion. "Are you ready for some ice cream?" "Can we get 2 scoops?" Emma asked, testing the boundaries immediately. Victoria looked at David questioningly. He nodded. 2 scoops is fine, but you have to eat real lunch when you get home." As David prepared to leave, he pulled Victoria aside. "My cell phone number is programmed into the phone I gave you. Any problems, any concerns, you call immediately." "I will," Victoria promised. David looked at his daughters, who were already investigating a nearby duck pond with the fearless curiosity of children who felt safe in the world. "Victoria, they're good kids, but they're still kids. Emma can be stubborn when she doesn't want to do something, and Sophie gets overwhelmed in crowds. Emma's protective of her sister, so if Sophie gets upset, Emma will too." Victoria nodded, filing away every piece of information like she was memorizing a crucial business brief. Except this was more important than any deal she'd ever negotiated. "And Victoria?" David's voice grew softer. "They're going to ask questions. About you, about why you're spending time with them, about your family. Think about how you want to answer before they put you on the spot." As David drove away, Victoria found herself alone with her daughters for the first time in 6 years. The weight of the moment was overwhelming. All the bedtime stories she'd missed, all the scraped knees she hadn't kissed better, all the daily moments of motherhood she'd traded for conference calls and board meetings. "Miss Victoria, are you okay?" Emma asked, her perceptive eyes studying Victoria's face. "You look scared." "I'm a little nervous," Victoria admitted. "I want to make sure we have a really good time together." "Why are you nervous?" Sophie asked, slipping her small hand into Victoria's. "We like you." The simple statement hit Victoria like a lightning bolt. They liked her. These 2 little girls, who had every reason in the world to be wary of adults who came and went from their lives, genuinely liked spending time with her. "I like you too," Victoria said, squeezing Sophie's hand gently. "Both of you, very much." The ice cream shop was busy with other families enjoying their Saturday afternoon, and Victoria found herself studying the other parents, noting how they talked to their children, how they handled small meltdowns and sibling squabbles, how they moved through the world with the practiced ease of people who'd been parenting since day one. "Can I have cookies and cream?" Sophie asked, pressing her face against the glass display case. "You can have whatever flavor you want," Victoria replied, then caught herself. Was that the right answer? Should she be encouraging healthier choices, setting limits? Emma seemed to read her uncertainty. "Sophie always gets cookies and cream," she said matter-of-factly, "and I get strawberry. What flavor do you like, Miss Victoria?" Victoria looked at the array of options, realizing she couldn't remember the last time she'd had ice cream. "I don't know," she admitted. "What do you think I should try?" "Chocolate," both girls said simultaneously, then giggled at their synchronized response. As they sat at a small table with their ice cream, Victoria found herself marveling at the ordinary magic of the moment. Sophie got more ice cream on her face than in her mouth, while Emma ate with careful precision, occasionally reaching over to wipe her sister's cheek with a napkin. "Miss Victoria," Emma said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" Victoria's pulse spiked. "Of course." "At school the other day, you said you were missing someone because you made some mistakes. Was it your kids?" Victoria's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. She looked at Emma's serious face, then at Sophie, who was listening with the intense focus she brought to difficult reading passages. "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "I had 2 daughters, and I made some very bad choices that took me away from them." "Where are your daughters now?" Sophie asked, ice cream forgotten.
Victoria's throat tightened. "They live with their father. He takes very good care of them, and they're happy and safe and loved." "But you miss them," Emma said, and it wasn't a question. "Every single day," Victoria whispered. Sophie tilted her head, studying Victoria with curious eyes. "If you miss them so much, why don't you just go see them?" Victoria felt tears threatening and fought them back, because when you hurt people you love, especially children, you have to earn the right to be in their lives again. You have to prove that you've changed, that you won't make the same mistakes. "What kind of mistakes did you make?" Emma asked, with the directness that only children possessed. Victoria looked at her daughters, really looked at them, taking in Emma's determined chin and Sophie's trusting eyes, and decided they deserved the truth, even if they didn't yet know it was about them. "I thought that working all the time and making lots of money was the best way to take care of my family," Victoria said slowly. "But what I was really doing was choosing work over spending time with the people I loved. I missed bedtime stories and school plays and scraped knees and all the little moments that make up a childhood." "That is a big mistake," Sophie said solemnly. "The biggest," Victoria agreed. "And by the time I realized what I'd done, my daughters were living a happy life without me. Their father had found someone who could give them the love and attention they deserved." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the seriousness of someone much older than 6. "Do you think your daughters will forgive you?" Victoria's voice cracked. "I don't know. I hope so. But even if they don't, I want them to know that leaving them was the worst mistake I ever made, and that I think about them every single day." "I bet they miss you too," Sophie said with the innocent optimism of childhood. "Maybe," Victoria said, wiping away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts. "I hope so." Have you ever had to earn back someone's trust after making a huge mistake? Tell us in the comments about the power of second chances and never giving up on love. After ice cream, they walked to the playground, where Victoria discovered that she had no idea how to play with children. She stood awkwardly by the swings while Emma and Sophie ran toward the slide, clearly expecting her to follow. "Miss Victoria," Sophie called, "come push me on the swings." Victoria approached the swings like they were complex machinery she'd never encountered before. How hard should she push? How high was too high? What if Sophie got scared or hurt on her watch? "Like this," Emma demonstrated, giving Sophie a gentle push that sent her sisters soaring with delighted squeals. "Not too hard, or she'll get scared." Victoria took over, marveling at Sophie's trust as she leaned back in the swing, completely confident that Victoria would keep her safe. When had anyone trusted her so completely? "Higher," Sophie demanded, and Victoria gave her a slightly stronger push. "Be careful," Emma warned, ever the protective big sister. "Sophie thinks she's braver than she really is." Victoria looked at Emma, this 6-year-old who had clearly taken on responsibilities beyond her years, and felt a familiar pang of recognition. "You take good care of your sister." "Someone has to," Emma said simply. "Sophie's little, and she doesn't always think about getting hurt." The casual comment revealed so much about their family dynamics, about Emma stepping into a protective role that spoke of early maturity and deep love for her sister. Victoria wondered if Emma's protectiveness had developed because she'd sensed Sophie's vulnerability after losing their mother, or if it was simply part of her nature. "Emma," Victoria said carefully, "you know it's not your job to take care of Sophie all the time, right? That's what grown-ups are for." Emma shrugged. "I know, but I love her, and Daddy says family takes care of family." The simple statement hit Victoria like a physical blow. Family takes care of family. It was a lesson David had clearly taught their daughters, a principle Victoria had violated in the most fundamental way possible. "Your daddy is very smart," Victoria managed. "Yeah, he is. And Sarah is really nice, too. She makes good pancakes and reads us stories and helps us with our homework. She's not our real mom, but she's like a mom." Victoria's heart clenched, but she forced herself to smile. "That sounds wonderful. Everyone needs people who love them and take care of them." "What about you?" Sophie asked, still swinging, but looking back at Victoria. "Who takes care of you?" The innocent question stopped Victoria cold. Who did take care of her? She lived alone, worked alone, made decisions alone. She had employees and business associates, but no one who cared whether she ate dinner or got enough sleep or felt lonely on Sunday afternoons. "I take care of myself," Victoria said, realizing how hollow it sounded.
"That sounds sad," Sophie said, matter-of-factly. "Sophie," Emma said with the diplomatic skills of someone used to managing adult emotions, "maybe Miss Victoria likes taking care of herself." But Emma could see in her eyes that she understood exactly how sad it really was. As their 2 hours together drew to a close, Victoria found herself desperate to extend the time, to create just a few more memories with these remarkable little girls who were her daughters, but didn't know it. "Miss Victoria," Emma said as they walked back toward the ice cream shop where David would pick them up, "will we see you again? I mean, besides at the reading program?" Victoria looked down at her daughter, this perceptive, protective, amazing child, and felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. "Would you like to see me again?" "Yeah," Emma said simply. "You're different from other grown-ups." "Different how?"
Emma considered this seriously. "You listen like you really want to hear what we're saying. And you seem sad, but not scary sad. Like you're sad because you care about things." Victoria had to stop walking for a moment, overwhelmed by her 6-year-old daughter's emotional intelligence. "I do care," Victoria said quietly. "I care more than I've ever cared about anything." When David arrived to pick up the girls, Victoria could see him scanning their faces for signs of distress, confusion, or any indication that the afternoon hadn't gone well. Instead, he found 2 happy, ice cream sticky children chattering excitedly about their adventure. "Daddy!" Sophie ran to him immediately. "Miss Victoria pushed me on the swings really high, and we had 2 scoops of ice cream, and she told us about her daughters who she misses." David's eyebrows rose as he looked at Victoria questioningly. "They asked questions," Victoria said quietly. "I tried to answer honestly, without saying too much." Emma tugged on David's sleeve. "Daddy, Miss Victoria's daughters don't live with her anymore because she made mistakes. But she misses them every day and wants them to forgive her. Don't you think they should give her another chance?" Victoria watched David's face as he processed Emma's words, saw him understanding the conversation that had taken place, the trust that had been built, the connection that was forming. "I think," David said carefully, "that if someone really wants to change and is working hard to be better, then the people who love them should try to give them another chance." Emma nodded seriously. "That's what I think, too." As David loaded the girls into their car seats, Victoria felt the familiar panic of not knowing when she'd see them again, not knowing if this magical afternoon was a one-time gift or the beginning of something more. "Victoria," David called softly as he prepared to close Emma's door. "Yes? Same time next Saturday?" Victoria's heart soared. "Really? Really? But—" David paused, and Victoria saw something shift in his expression. "I think it's time we had a serious conversation about the future, about what this looks like long-term, and when, if, we tell the girls the truth." Victoria nodded, understanding the weight of what he was suggesting. "I'm ready for that conversation." "Good, because they deserve to know who you are, Victoria. But more importantly, they deserve to know that you're not going anywhere this time." As David drove away with Emma and Sophie waving from the back seat, Victoria stood in the parking lot and felt something she hadn't experienced in 6 years, hope for a future that included her daughters. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. "Caroline, it's Victoria. I need you to do something for me." "Of course, Miss Blackstone. What can I help you with?" Victoria took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to ask would change everything about the life she'd built. "I need you to start the process of relocating the main offices to Portland. And Caroline, I'm not coming back to New York. Find someone to buy my penthouse. I'm staying here permanently." "Ms. Blackstone, are you sure? The business implications alone." "I'm sure," Victoria said, watching the tail lights of David's car disappear around a corner. "For the first time in 6 years, I'm absolutely certain about what matters most." 3 months later, Victoria stood in the kitchen of her new house, a modest 3-bedroom home in David and the girls' neighborhood, nothing like her Manhattan penthouse, but filled with something her expensive properties had never contained: the possibility of family dinners, and homework help, and bedtime stories. The doorbell rang, and Victoria opened it to find David, Emma and Sophie on her front porch, all of them looking nervous and excited in equal measure. "Hi," David said simply. "Hi," Victoria replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Emma and Sophie peered around their father with wide eyes, taking in Victoria's new life, the modest furniture, the children's books she'd optimistically placed on the coffee table, the photo album she'd started filling with pictures from their Saturday outings. "Daddy," Sophie ran to him immediately, "there's something very important we need to talk about. Something about Miss Victoria that you need to know." Victoria kneeled down to Emma and Sophie's eye level, her hands trembling as she looked at her daughters, these remarkable, resilient children who had somehow found room in their hearts for the stranger who'd been volunteering at their school, who'd taken them to ice cream, who'd listened to their stories and answered their questions with honesty and love. "Emma, Sophie," Victoria said softly, "do you remember when I told you about the daughters I missed? The ones I made mistakes with?" Both girls nodded solemnly. Victoria took a shaky breath. "Those daughters, they're you. I'm your mother. Your first mother. The one who went away when you were babies." The silence that followed felt endless. Victoria watched her daughters process this information, saw the exact moment when understanding dawned in Emma's eyes, followed more slowly by confusion in Sophie's. "You're our real mom?" Sophie asked finally, her voice small and uncertain. "I'm your birth mother," Victoria corrected gently, "but Sarah is your mom too. You can have more than one mom, and all of them can love you completely." Emma was quiet, studying Victoria's face with the intensity she brought to difficult problems. "That's why you look so sad all the time," she said finally. "You were missing us." "Every single day," whispered Victoria. "But why did you go away?" Sophie asked, the question Victoria had been dreading and preparing for since their first conversation. Victoria looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. "Because I thought that working all the time and making lots of money was the best way to take care of you. But I was wrong. You didn't need more money. You needed a mother who spent time with you."
Your mom to be here, to read you stories, and kiss your scraped knees and tuck you in at night. And by the time I realized that, you had built a beautiful life with your dad and Sarah. "Are you going to go away again?" Emma asked, with the directness that always took Victoria's breath away. "Never," Victoria said firmly. "I promise you, with everything I am, that I will never leave you again. I moved here to Portland to be close to you. I changed my whole life because you are the most important thing in the world to me." Sophie looked between Victoria and David, processing this information with 6-year-old logic. "So now we have a daddy and Sarah mom and birth mom?" "If that's what you want," Victoria said, her heart hammering. "But only if you want that, sweetheart. I know this is confusing and maybe scary." "It's not scary," Emma interrupted. "It explains things, like why you understood about missing people and why you always seemed like you cared about us more than other grown-ups do." Victoria felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I care about you more than I've ever cared about anything. Both of you. You're my heart walking around outside my body." Sophie moved closer, studying Victoria's face with the same intensity Emma had shown. "Can I hug you? Like a real hug? A mom hug?" Victoria opened her arms and Sophie flew into them with the trust of a child who'd decided to believe in second chances. A moment later, Emma joined them, and Victoria found herself surrounded by her daughters, breathing in their little girl scent of strawberry shampoo and playground adventures, feeling their small arms around her neck, finally holding the children she'd thought she'd lost forever. "I love you," Victoria whispered into their hair. "I love you both so much, and I'm so sorry I went away. I'm so sorry I missed so much of your lives." "We love you too," Sophie said, matter-of-factly. "We love Sarah, Mom, and now we love Birth Mom too." Over their heads, Victoria met David's eyes and saw something there she hadn't dared hoped for. Forgiveness. Not romantic reconciliation. Too much had happened for that, but something equally precious. The forgiveness of a co-parent who believed she'd finally learned how to put her children first. "Thank you," Victoria mouthed to him. David nodded. "Welcome home," he said quietly. 6 months later, Victoria's business had been successfully relocated to Portland, with regional offices handling the day-to-day operations while she focused on strategic decisions and spent her afternoons at Emma and Sophie's school events, her evenings helping with homework, and her weekends building the relationship with her daughters she'd thought she'd lost forever. The Emma Walsh Scholarship Program she'd started had grown into a foundation supporting women's education nationwide. Victoria had discovered that using her wealth and business skills to create opportunities for others was far more fulfilling than simply accumulating more success for herself. "Birth Mom," Sophie called from the backyard, where Victoria was pushing both girls on the tire swing David had installed. "Tell us the story about the airport again." It had become Sophie's favorite story, how Victoria had seen them at LAX and realized that all her success meant nothing without them. How she'd come to Portland and had to learn how to be a mother all over again. How love had given her the courage to change everything about her life. Once upon a time, Victoria began, as Emma and Sophie swung in lazy circles. There was a very foolish woman who thought money was more important than love. As she told the story, their story, Victoria caught sight of David and Sarah through the kitchen window, preparing dinner together while keeping an eye on the backyard scene. Sarah had embraced Victoria's return to the girls' lives with grace and generosity, understanding that children could never have too many people who loved them. They'd created something unprecedented, a blended family built on the foundation that Emma and Sophie's well-being came before any adult ego or complicated history. Victoria would never be Sarah's place in the girls' daily lives, but she'd earned her own place, as the mother who'd learned that coming home sometimes meant giving up everything she thought she wanted for everything that actually mattered. And they all lived happily ever after, Victoria concluded as the swing came to a stop. "That's not the end," Emma protested. "The end is that we're still living happily ever after right now, right?" Victoria looked at her daughters, these incredible children who'd found room in their hearts to forgive her, to love her, to give her a second chance she never deserved but would spend the rest of her life earning, and felt the deep contentment she'd eluded through all her years of chasing success. "You're absolutely right," Victoria said, gathering both girls in her arms. "We're still living happily ever after, and we always will be." As the Portland sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Victoria Blackstone, former billionaire workaholic, current devoted mother, held her daughters close and knew with absolute certainty that she was finally, truly home.
Victoria Blackstone learned that all the money in the world means nothing without love. Her journey from successful businesswoman to devoted mother reminds us that it's never too late to choose what really matters. Sometimes coming home means giving up everything you thought you wanted for everything that actually matters. Have you ever had to choose between success and family? Share with me, and don't forget to like, share, and follow.